For 3 straight days, the rain had been relentless. Isabella Rossi had stopped paying attention to it. A deep, persistent chill had settled into her very bones, feeling less like a temporary discomfort and more like a part of who she was, a condition she was born to endure. At 18, she navigated her world like a ghost, quiet and gaunt, easy for anyone to ignore, and that suited her just fine. Anonymity was a shield, especially when you were indebted to men who used shattered knuckles and bruised faces as a means of collection. She was employed at a bakery on a street corner that fortune had long since forgotten. Falcone's Bakery, the faded sign proclaimed. The original Falcone had passed away 5 years prior, leaving his nephew Marco to manage the business with the bitter disposition of someone who despised his work, his patrons, and his own existence. The equipment was ancient. The floors were a permanent mess of old sugar and grime, and a spiderweb crack ran across the front window like a silent threat. Isabella didn't mind. The work was hard. The pay was terrible. But Marco didn't ask questions about her aunt's debts, or why she sometimes came to work with bruises that hadn't been there the day before. He just pointed at the flour bags that needed moving, or the counter that needed scrubbing, and Isabella did what she was told. She was good at that, doing what she was told. The morning shift started at 4:30, which meant Isabella woke at 3:45 in the apartment she shared with her Aunt Gina. Calling it an apartment was generous. It was a room and a half above a pawn shop, with water stains on the ceiling and a radiator that clanked all night but produced no actual heat. Gina was passed out on the couch when Isabella left, one arm flung over her face, an empty bottle on the floor beside her. There was a man Isabella didn't recognize asleep in the chair by the window, his mouth open, snoring. Isabella didn't wake either of them. She just pulled on her coat, too thin for the weather, but it was the only one she had, and walked the 14 blocks to Falcone's in the dark. The rain soaked through to her skin before she'd made it 3 blocks. By the time she reached the bakery, her fingers were numb, and her teeth were chattering so hard she had to clench her jaw to make them stop. Marco was already inside, smoking a cigarette and glaring at the ancient mixer like it had personally insulted him. "You're late," he said, even though she wasn't. "Sorry," Isabella said, because it was easier than arguing. "Flour delivery is coming at 6 o'clock. You'll unload it." "Okay. And the espresso machine's busted again. Figure it out." Isabella nodded. The espresso machine broke at least twice a week, usually because Marco kicked it when it didn't work fast enough. She'd learned how to coax it back to life with a specific combination of button presses and percussive maintenance that probably violated several safety regulations. The morning passed in the usual blur of work. Isabella mixed dough, shaped rolls, monitored oven temperatures, swept floors, wiped down counters, made coffee for the handful of customers who wandered in looking half dead and desperate for caffeine. Her hands moved automatically, muscle memory taking over while her mind drifted somewhere else, somewhere warmer, somewhere where she wasn't so chuffered she felt like her bones were made of lead. Around 9:30, the breakfast rush, if you could call 6 people a rush, died down, and Isabella was restocking the pastry case when the bell above the door chimed. She didn't look up right away. She was balancing 3 cannoli in one hand and trying to arrange them on the display tray without dropping them. Her fingers still clumsy from the cold, but something made the air in the bakery change. A shift in pressure, like the moment before lightning strikes. Isabella glanced toward the door and froze. The man standing in the entrance wasn't the usual kind of customer Falcone's attracted. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his dark coat in a way that suggested expensive tailoring. His hair was black, cut short and neat, and his face was the kind that made you look twice. Sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes that were such a pale gray they almost didn't look real. He was maybe 30, maybe older. It was hard to tell. There was something ageless about him, something that felt less like youth and more like permanence. But it wasn't his looks that made Isabella's stomach drop. It was the way everyone else in the bakery reacted to him. Marco, who'd been complaining loudly to a supplier on the phone, went silent mid-sentence. The 2 customers sitting at the small table by the window both stood up so fast, their chairs scraped against the floor. One of them pulled out his wallet, threw cash on the table, and left without waiting for change. The other followed 30 seconds later. The man didn't acknowledge any of this. He just walked toward the counter, his movements unhurried, his expression unreadable. Isabella's hands tightened on the cannoli tray. She had no idea who this man was, but she understood danger when she saw it. It was in the way he moved, controlled, deliberate, like a predator who knew he was at the top of the food chain. It was in the silence that followed him, thick and suffocating. He stopped in front of the counter. Up close, Isabella could see the details she'd missed from across the room. The faint scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the way his coat probably costs more than she made in 6 months, the absolute stillness he carried like he didn't waste energy on unnecessary movement. His pale eyes settled on her. Isabella's throat went dry. "Coffee," he said. His voice was low, quiet, but it carried weight. Not a request, a statement. "Yes, sir." The words came out automatic, trained into her by years of service work and survival. "What kind would you like?" "Black." Isabella nodded and turned toward the espresso machine, grateful for the excuse to break eye contact. Her hands were shaking. She told herself it was from the cold. As she grabbed a clean cup and filled it, the machine hissed and gurgled, and she focused on that sound, on the familiar ritual of making coffee. Anything to ignore the awareness crawling up her spine that told her this man was still watching her. She set the cup on the counter between them. $2.50. He didn't reach for his wallet. Instead, he studied her face with an intensity that made her want to step back. Isabella kept her expression neutral, the same polite blankness she wore with every customer. But something about his gaze felt different, invasive, like he was cataloging every detail. The shadows under her eyes, the faded bruise on her cheekbone she'd tried to cover with makeup, the way her uniform hung loose because she'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. "You work here often?" he asked. It was such a normal question that it somehow made everything worse. "Every day," Isabella said carefully. "Morning shift," he nodded once, like she'd confirmed something he already knew. Behind her, Isabella heard Marco moving in the kitchen. The scrape of a pan, the slam of an oven door, normal sounds that felt very far away. The man picked up his coffee. For a second, Isabella thought he was going to leave, and relief started to uncurl in her chest. Then Marco appeared from the kitchen, wiping flour off his hands with a towel, and whatever color had been in his face drained away the moment he saw who was standing at his counter. "Mr. Moretti," Marco said, and his voice cracked on the name. I didn't know you were coming. I would have. Is everything?" "The coffee is fine," the man, Moretti said, cutting him off. He still hadn't looked away from Isabella. Marco's eyes darted between them, confused and panicked. Of course, Isabella. Get back to she stays," Moretti said. Isabella's pulse kicked into overdrive. She didn't understand what was happening, but every instinct she'd developed surviving the past 18 years was screaming at her to run. She stayed perfectly still. "I need to speak with you," Moretti said to Marco, finally breaking eye contact with Isabella to glance at her boss in private. "Yes, absolutely, Isabella. Take your break." Isabella didn't argue. She set down the pastry tray, wiped her hands on her apron, and walked toward the back exit with measured steps that didn't betray the fact that her heart was trying to break through her ribs. She pushed through the door into the narrow hallway that led to the storage room and the alley exit. And the moment she was out of sight, she pressed her back against the wall and tried to breathe. Moretti. She'd heard that name before. Everyone in the city had heard that name, even people like Isabella, who tried very hard not to pay attention to the things that happened in the shadows. The Moretti family controlled half the city's real estate, legitimate businesses that probably weren't so legitimate if you looked too close, and a network of loyalty that ran deeper than blood. They weren't the kind of people you wanted noticing you. And one of them had just walked into Falcone's and asked about her schedule. Isabella closed her eyes. This was bad. This was very, very bad. And she didn't even know why. She pressed her palms against the cool wall and counted her breaths. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The technique had been taught to her by a school counselor back when she'd still gone to school before Gina's debts had gotten so bad that Isabella had to drop out and work full-time. It usually helped. Today, it barely took the edge off. She didn't know how long she stood there. 5 minutes, maybe 10, before she heard Marco calling her name. "Isabella, get out here." She pushed off the wall and walked back to the front. Moretti was gone. Marco was behind the counter, and the look on his face was something between rage and terror. "What the hell did you do?" he demanded. Isabella blinked. Nothing. I just made him coffee. You must have done something. He doesn't come down here. He doesn't. People like him don't. Marco ran both hands through his hair, making it stand on end. Jesus Christ, this is bad. This is so bad. I don't understand. What did he want? He asked about you. Marco pointed at her like it was an accusation. How long you've worked, where you live, if you have family. Ice flooded Isabella's veins. What did you tell him? The truth. What else was I supposed to do? You don't lie to Leo Moretti. Marco's voice climbed higher. Do you owe him money? Is this about your aunt's debts? I don't owe him anything. I don't even know him. Well, he knows you, Vassan. Marco grabbed a rag and started wiping down the counter with violent, jerky movements. He knows you, and now I'm involved. And if this comes back on me, if my place gets burned down, because you, Marco, I swear I don't know what's going on, then figure it out and fix it before it destroys both of us. Isabella opened her mouth to respond, but Marco waved her off. Just get back to work and stay away from the front. I don't want you dealing with customers for the rest of the day. She wanted to argue. She wanted to demand answers to understand what the hell had just happened and why a man like Leo Moretti would care about someone like her. But Marco looked like he was about 10 seconds away from a breakdown, and Isabella needed this job, needed the money, needed something steady in a life that felt like it was constantly trying to throw her off a cliff. So she nodded, grabbed a broom, and retreated to the back to sweep the storage room for the third time that week. The rest of her shift passed in tense silence. Marco avoided her. The few customers who came in seemed to sense the atmosphere and left quickly. By the time 2 o'clock rolled around and Isabella's shift ended, she felt like she'd been holding her breath for hours. She grabbed her coat, said goodbye to Marco, who grunted without looking at her, and stepped out into the rain. It was still coming down in sheets, turning the streets into rivers of gray water that carried trash and oil slicks toward the gutters. Isabella pulled her hood up and started the walk home, her mind churning. Leo Moretti had asked about her. Why? She replayed the encounter in her head, searching for clues. The way he'd looked at her, the questions he'd asked Marco. None of it made sense. Isabella was nobody. She worked at a failing bakery in a bad neighborhood, lived in a whole apartment with an aunt who drank more than she breathed and had exactly 0 connections to anyone important. Maybe it was a case of mistaken identity. Maybe he'd confused her with someone else. That had to be it. She was so caught up in her thoughts that she didn't notice the car until she was almost at her building. It was parked at the curb, black and sleek, and completely out of place in this neighborhood where most vehicles were held together with rust and prayers. The windows were tinted dark. The engine was running. Isabella slowed, her instinct screaming warning. The back door opened. Leo Moretti stepped out. Isabella stopped walking. Her brain was telling her to run, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She just stood there in the rain, water streaming down her face, while the most dangerous man she'd ever seen walked toward her with the same unhurried grace he'd shown in the bakery. He stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the rain beating on his coat, far enough that she didn't feel trapped yet. Isabella Rossi, he said, and hearing her full name in his voice sent a shock of fear through her system. How do you know my name? I know a lot about you. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. You work at Falcone's 6 days a week, morning shift. You live with your Aunt Gina in apartment 3B. You dropped out of school 8 months ago. Your aunt owes money to 3 different loan sharks. You've been skipping meals to make the minimum payments. Isabella's hands curled into fists at her sides. Are you following me? Protecting you, he corrected. There's a difference. I don't need protection. Yes, you do. His tone was matter-of-fact, like they were discussing the weather. Your aunt borrowed $15,000 from people who don't forgive debts. She hasn't made a payment in 2 months. They were going to start collecting from you. Isabella's stomach twisted. She'd known about the debts. Gina's borrowing had gotten worse over the past year, but she hadn't known the numbers were that high. 15,000? That might as well have been 15 million for all the chance Isabella had of paying it back. That's not your problem, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I made it my problem. Moretti reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out to her. Your aunt's debts are cleared. All of them. Isabella stared at the paper like it might bite her. What? The money's been paid. You don't owe anyone anything. Why would you? She shook her head, confusion and fear tangling together. You don't even know me. I've known you for 2 years, he said quietly. Since the night you got jumped outside the corner store on 5th Street. Do you remember that? Isabella went very still. She remembered. It had been winter late at night, and she'd been walking home from a double shift. 3 men had cornered her in an alley looking for money or something worse. Isabella had fought. She always fought, but it hadn't mattered. They'd been bigger, stronger, and there were 3 of them. And then suddenly, there weren't. Someone had intervened. Isabella had been on the ground, her vision blurred with tears and pain. So she'd only caught glimpses, a figure moving fast, the sound of fists hitting flesh, the men running. When she'd finally gotten to her feet, the alley had been empty except for her and the stranger who'd saved her. She'd tried to thank him, but he'd just told her to go home and lock her door. She'd never seen his face until now. That was you, Isabella whispered. Moretti nodded. That was me, and I've been watching ever since, making sure you stayed safe. The words should have been comforting. They weren't. They were terrifying. That's not protection, Isabella said, her voice shaking. That's stalking. Call it what you want. You're still alive because I've been there. I didn't ask you to what? No, but he agreed. You didn't, but I'm not asking for permission. Isabella took a step back, then another. Stay away from me. I can't do that. You don't own me. Something flashed in his eyes. Not anger exactly, but something close to it. Not yet. The words hit her like a physical blow. She turned and ran. She didn't make it far. She'd barely taken 5 steps when her foot hit a patch of slick pavement, and she went down hard, her hand slamming into the concrete. Pain exploded through her right palm, sharp and immediate. She looked down and saw blood welling from a gash across her hand, where she'd caught the edge of broken glass embedded in the sidewalk. Shit, she hissed, cradling her injured hand against her chest. Moretti was beside her before she could push herself up. He gripped her elbow, not hard but firm, and lifted her to her feet like she weighed nothing. Let me see, he said. I'm fine, Isabella. His voice dropped lower, carrying a note of command that made her freeze. Let me see your hand. She didn't know why she obeyed. Maybe because her hand was bleeding and the pain was making her dizzy. Maybe because some part of her brain recognized that fighting him right now would be pointless. Maybe because when he said her name like that, and slow and certain, something in her wanted to listen. She held out her hand. Moretti examined the cut with a clinical efficiency that surprised her. His fingers were gentle as he turned her palm to the light, checking the depth of the wound. Rain continued to fall around them, but he didn't seem to notice or care. It's deep, he said. You need stitches. I'll be fine. I just need to. You'll get an infection. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. Who the hell carried handkerchiefs anymore? And wrapped it around her hand, applying pressure. My car is right here. I'll take you to a doctor. No, it's not a request. I don't care. Isabella tried to pull her hand back, but his grip tightened. Not painful, just immovable. Let go of me. You're bleeding through the fabric, he said calmly. In about 30 seconds, you're going to start feeling elated. In 60, you'll pass out. I can carry you to the car, or you can walk. Your choice. Isabella hated that he was right. She could already feel the edges of her vision starting to blur, that familiar floating feeling that came with blood loss and shock. She'd skipped breakfast and lunch. Her body didn't have much left to give. I can't afford a doctor, she said quietly. I'm paying. I don't want your money. You don't have a choice. He guided her to the car, one hand on her elbow, the other still putting pressure on her wounded hand. Not about this. The door opened before they reached it. There was a driver inside, Isabella realized dimly, and then Moretti was helping her into the back seat. The interior was warm and dry leather seats that probably cost more than her entire apartment. She sank into them, exhausted and dizzy, and so confused. Moretti slid in beside her, still holding her hand. St. Catherine's Hospital, he told the driver. Emergency entrance. The car pulled smoothly away from the curb. Isabella leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She was going to wake up in her shitty apartment, and this whole bizarre nightmare would be over. Why are you doing this? She asked without opening her eyes. Because you're mine, Moretti said simply, and I take care of what's mine. Isabella's eyes snapped open. She turned to look at him, this stranger who'd apparently been watching her for 2 years, who'd paid off her aunt's debts, who'd just calmly announced that he owned her like it was a fact of nature. I'm not yours, she said. He met her gaze, and there was something in his pale eyes that made her breath catch. Not cruelty, not quite possessiveness, something deeper and more complicated. "Yes," he said quietly, "you are. You just don't know it yet." The hospital was bright and efficient. A doctor took one look at Isabella's hand and whisked her away to an examination room. Moretti stayed with her the entire time, standing in the corner with his arms crossed, while the doctor cleaned the wound and stitched it closed. 6 stitches, neat and precise. The doctor gave her a tetanus shot, antibiotics, and instructions to keep the wound clean and dry. "You'll need to come back in a week to have the stitches removed," the doctor said. Isabella nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her hand throbbed despite the local anesthetic, and exhaustion was dragging at her like an undertow. "I'll make sure she comes back," Moretti said. The doctor glanced at him, then at Isabella, and something in his expression shifted, like he understood dynamics he couldn't name, but recognized anyway. "All right," he said carefully. "The bill will be sent to me," Moretti said. "Put it on my account." They left the hospital 20 minutes later. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city looking washed clean and strangely empty. Moretti's driver was waiting at the curb, and Isabella let herself be guided back into the car because she was too tired to fight anymore. "Take us to her building," Moretti said. "No." Isabella's voice came out hoarse-sorrow. "I don't want you knowing where I live. I already know where you live, Isabella. I told you that." "Right." He told her that because he'd been watching her, protecting her, stalking her, whatever the hell he wanted to call it. The car pulled away from the hospital. Isabella stared out the window, watching the city slide past. Her hand ucked, her head, everything ucked. "Your aunt's debts are paid," Moretti said after a long silence. "But that building you're living in isn't safe. The locks don't work. The fire escape is rusted through. Anyone could get in. I can take care of myself. You shouldn't have to." He shifted his seat, and she felt his attention on her like a physical weight. "I have an apartment downtown, empty right now. 3-bedroom, secure building, doorman. You and your aunt can move in." Isabella turned to stare at him. "Are you insane? I'm practical. You're a stranger." "No," he said quietly. "I'm the man who's kept you alive for 2 years. I'm the man who just paid $15,000 so your aunt's creditors wouldn't break your legs. I'm the man who's going to make sure you never have to skip meals or work yourself to exhaustion or wake up afraid again." He paused. "I'm not a stranger, Isabella. I'm the only person who's been paying attention." The words shouldn't have landed. They shouldn't have found the hollow aching place inside her that wanted just once for someone to notice, to care, to see her as something other than a problem or a paycheck or a convenient target. But they did, and that made him more dangerous than any knife or fist ever could. "I don't know you," she said again, but the words sounded weaker this time. "You will." The car stopped in front of her building. Isabella reached for the door handle with her good hand, but Moretti caught her wrist gently. "Think about the apartment," he said. "I'll come back tomorrow with the keys." "You don't have to decide now. I've already decided." "The answer is no. We'll see." She pulled her wrist free and climbed out of the car. The driver didn't move to help her, probably smart, and Moretti stayed in his seat watching her through the open door. "Thank you," Isabella made herself say, "for the hospital and for paying my aunt's debts, but I don't need anything else from you." "Yes, you do," Moretti said. "You just haven't accepted it yet." Isabella slammed the door and walked into her building without looking back. She climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, her legs shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. The apartment door was unlocked. It always was because Gina couldn't be bothered with keys, and Isabella pushed it open to find her aunt exactly where she'd left her that morning, passed out on the couch. Isabella stood in the doorway, staring at the peeling wallpaper and the water stains and the empty bottles, and tried to figure out what the hell she was supposed to do now. Leo Moretti had paid off her aunt's debts. He'd taken care of her injury. He'd offered her a safe place to live. And he'd done it all without asking what she wanted, like her opinion was irrelevant. Because to him, maybe it was. She was his. He'd said so, like it was already decided. Isabella walked to the window and looked down at the street. The black car was still there, idling at the curb, waiting for her. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and closed her eyes. Tomorrow. She told herself she'd figure it out tomorrow. But deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, she knew the truth. Leo Moretti had already decided her future. The only question now was whether she'd fight him every step of the way, or whether she'd finally let someone else carry the weight she'd been holding alone for so long. Either way, nothing would ever be the same. Isabella didn't sleep that night. She lay on the narrow mattress in a room barely bigger than a closet and stared at the water-stained ceiling while her bandaged hand throbbed in time with her heartbeat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Leo Moretti's face, those pale gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her, the calm certainty in his voice when he'd said she was his. Around 4 in the morning, she gave up on sleep entirely and went to take a shower. The water ran cold. The building's hot water had been out for 3 days, but Isabella barely noticed. She was used to cold, used to discomfort, used to making do with whatever scraps life threw at her. What she wasn't used to was someone paying attention. She dressed for work in the dark, careful not to wake Gina, who was snoring on the couch with one leg hanging off the edge. The stranger from yesterday was gone. Isabella didn't know if that was good or bad. Her aunt's taste in men had always been spectacularly terrible, but at least the revolving door of boyfriends meant Gina was usually too distracted to notice how much Isabella was struggling. "The debts are paid," Moretti had said. Isabella still couldn't wrap her head around that $15,000 gone. Just like that, she should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt like she'd traded one kind of debt for another, and this new one came with strings she couldn't see yet, but could definitely feel tightening around her throat. The walk to Falcone's was quiet, the pre-dawn streets empty, except for a few delivery trucks and the occasional taxi. Isabella kept her hood up and her head down, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every shadow felt like it might contain a figure in an expensive coat. Every car that passed made her tense. "You're being paranoid," she told herself. "He's not following you." But when she reached the bakery and saw the black car parked across the street, engine idling, she knew paranoia had nothing to do with it. Marco was already inside, but he took one look at Isabella's face, and whatever greeting he'd been planning died on his lips. "He's out there, isn't he?" Marco asked. Isabella nodded. "Jesus Christ." Marco ran both hands through his hair, making it stand up in wild tufts. "I can't have this. I can't have him watching my shop like I'm under surveillance. It's bad for business." "What business?" Isabella asked before she could stop herself. Marco glared at her. "You think this is funny? You think this is some kind of joke?" "No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean just stay in the back today all day. Don't come to the front. Don't look out the window. And if he comes in here again, you don't talk to him. You don't even look at him. Got it?" Isabella nodded. Her hand was starting to throb again, a dull ache that radiated up her arm. The painkillers the hospital had given her were wearing off. She spent the morning in the storage room, organizing shelves that didn't need organizing, sweeping floors that were already clean, busy work to keep her hands moving and her mind from spiraling. But no amount of distraction could silence the questions churning in her head. Why her? What did Leo Moretti want with someone like her? She was nobody, nothing. Just a girl who worked in a bakery and tried to survive one day at a time. "I've been watching you for 2 years. The thought made her skin crawl and her chest tighten with something that wasn't quite fear. Because part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, felt something else entirely. Something that whispered, "Someone saw you. Someone noticed." Around 10:30, Marco called her to the front. Isabella's stomach dropped, but when she pushed through the door, the customer waiting at the counter wasn't very sheddy. It was a woman in her 50s, well-dressed with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Isabella Rossi?" the woman asked. "Yes, I'm Margaret Chen. I work for Mr. Moretti." She set a leather folder on the counter. "He asked me to bring you these." Isabella stared at the folder like it might explode. "What is it?" "Keys to the apartment he mentioned yesterday. Lease agreement, building information, security codes." Margaret pushed the folder toward her. "The apartment is move-in ready, fully furnished, utilities included. Mr. Moretti has covered the first year's rent." "I didn't agree to this." "Mr. Moretti thought you might say that." Margaret pulled a business card from her purse and set it on top of the folder. "My number. When you change your mind, and you will call me, I'll arrange the move." "I'm not changing my mind." Margaret's expression softened slightly, and for the first time she looked almost sympathetic. "Miss Rossi, I've worked for the Moretti family for 15 years. I've seen Leo make a lot of decisions. Some good, some questionable, but I've never seen him like this. Whatever his reasons, he's not going to stop. You can fight him, exhaust yourself trying to maintain your independence, and end up in that apartment anyway. Or you can accept that he's offering you a way out of a situation that was going to destroy you eventually. You don't know anything about my situation. I know your aunt hasn't paid rent in 2 months. I know your landlord filed eviction papers yesterday. I know the electricity in your building gets shut off every other week because the owner won't pay the bills. Margaret's voice was matter of fact, not cruel, just stating facts. I know you're 18 years old and you look like you haven't eaten a real meal in weeks, so yes, Miss Rossi, I know plenty about your situation. Isabella's throat tightened. He sent you to guilt me into this. He sent me to give you options. What you do with them is up to you. Margaret tapped the folder once. The offer stands 24 hours a day. Call me when you're ready. She left before Isabella could respond. Marco emerged from the kitchen where he'd clearly been eavesdropping. Are you going to take it? No, why the hell not? Free apartment, rent paid, everything covered. Do you have any idea what people in this city would do for that kind of offer? It's not free. Nothing's free. So what? You think he's going to demand something in return? Marco leaned against the counter. Look, I don't know what his angle is, but Leo Moretti doesn't need to trick girls into sleeping with him. If he wanted that, trust me, he could get it without bribing anyone. Isabella felt her face heat. That's not what I didn't mean. Then what did you mean? I don't know. She picked up the folder, then set it back down. I don't know what he wants, and that's the problem. Marco studied her for a long moment. You know what I think? I think you're scared. Of course I'm scared. He's not of him, Marco interrupted. Of the fact that someone's offering you something good. You've spent so long surviving on scripts that you don't know what to do when someone hands you a real meal. The words hit harder than Isabella expected. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Marco pushed off the counter. Take the apartment, not kid, or don't. But stopped pretending this is about principles when it's really about fear. He disappeared back into the kitchen, leaving Isabella alone with the folder and a knot in her chest that felt like it might choke her. Her shift ended at 2 o'clock. Isabella grabbed her coat and the leather folder. She told herself she was taking it to throw it away, not because some part of her wanted to read what was inside, and headed for the exit. The black car was still parked across the street. Isabella stopped on the sidewalk, staring at it. She should walk away, go home, ignore it. But her feet carried her across the street before her brain could override the decision. The driver's window rolled down. The man behind the wheel was older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen things he'd rather forget. Miss Rossi, he said. Mr. Moretti asked me to drive you home. Tell Mr. Moretti I can walk. It's going to rain, I have a hood. There's construction on 5th Street. They've got the sidewalk torn up. You'll have to take the long way. Add another 20 minutes. Isabella tightened her grip on the folder. Why are you doing this? Doing what? Following me, watching me. Why does he care? The driver's expression didn't change. That's not my question to answer, miss. But if you want to ask him yourself, he'll be at the apartment tonight. 8 o'clock. Margaret left the address in that folder. I'm not going. That's your choice. The window started to roll up, but the offer stands. Isabella stood on the sidewalk and watched the car drive away. Then she looked down at the folder in her hands. She should throw it in the nearest trash can. She should go home, wake up Gina, and tell her they needed to figure out their next move because eviction was coming, and Isabella didn't have a plan. Instead, she opened the folder. The apartment was in the financial district. Top floor of a building Isabella had passed 100 times, but never thought she'd set foot in. The kind of place where doormen wore uniforms and the lobby had actual art on the walls, not posters or graffiti. The lease was straightforward, 12 months, rent covered, utilities included. No mention of what Moretti expected in return. No clauses about payments or obligations or services rendered. It looked too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Isabella closed the folder and started walking home. The rain started 10 minutes later, just like the driver had predicted. By the time Isabella reached her building, she was soaked through, and her injured hand was throbbing so badly she wanted to cry. She climbed on the stairs, each step feeling like it required more energy than she had, and pushed open the apartment door. Gina was awake. sitting at the tiny kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a cigarette, still wearing yesterday's clothes. She looked up when Isabella walked in. "Where have you been?" Gina asked. "Work, same as every day. You're late." Isabella didn't have the energy to argue. She dropped the folder on the counter and went to the bathroom to dry off. When she came back out, Gina was holding the folder, flipping through the pages with wide eyes. "What the hell is this?" Gina demanded. "It's nothing. Give it back. This is a lease agreement for an apartment in the financial district." Gina looked up, and for the first time in months, she looked something close to sober. "Isabella, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything." "Then where did this come from?" Isabella sank into the chair across from her aunt. Every bone in her body ached. "Someone offered to help us. That's all." "Who? What kind of help?" "The kind that means we don't get evicted. The kind that means you don't owe money to people who break kneecaps when you're late on payments." Gina's face went pale. "You paid them off? How? You don't have that kind of money." "I didn't pay them. Someone else did." "Who?" Isabella met her aunt's eyes. "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters. Nobody does something like this without wanting something back. What does he want?" "What did you promise him?" "Nothing." "I didn't promise anything. Then why is he doing this?" Gina's voice climbed higher, panic creeping in. "Isabella, what did you get us into?" "I didn't get us into anything. He helped. That's all. Nobody just helped Isabella. Not people who can afford apartments like this." Gina stabbed her finger at the address. "This building has a waiting list. You can't just walk in there unless you've got serious money or serious connections." "So, who is he?" Isabella's jaw tightened. "His name is Leo Moretti." The cigarette fell from Gina's fingers. "Oh my God. You know him. Everyone knows that name. Everyone with half a brain and an ounce of common sense stays as far away from that family as possible." Gina stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "We're not taking this apartment. We're not taking anything from him. Our landlord filed eviction papers yesterday. We're out in 2 weeks either way. Then we'll find somewhere else. A shelter, another apartment. I don't care. But we're not getting involved with the Morettis. The debts are paid, Gina. All of them. $15,000 gone. You don't have to worry about Sal's guys showing up to break your fingers anymore." Gina stared at her. "He paid $15,000 for you." The way she said it made Isabella feel like something dirty, like a transaction. "Not for me," Isabella said quietly. "For us, so you'd be safe." "No," Gina shook her head. "No. That's worse. Don't you see? He didn't do this because he's a good person, Isabella. He did it because he wants something. And when men like Leo Moretti want something, they take it, whether you agree or not." Isabella stood up, exhaustion making her sway slightly. "Then maybe it's a good thing he wants to keep me alive instead of dead." "Isabella, I'm taking the apartment." The words came out before Isabella had fully decided, but once they were spoken, she knew they were true. "You can come with me, or you can stay here and wait for the eviction notice. Your choice." She walked to her room and closed the door before Gina could respond. Isabella sat on the edge of her mattress and stared at her bandaged hand. The stitches pulled when she flexed her fingers, a sharp reminder of how quickly everything had changed. Yesterday, her biggest problem had been figuring out how to make rent. Today, she was considering moving into an apartment owned by a man who'd been watching her for 2 years, a man who said she was his. Her phone buzzed. Isabella pulled it out, expecting a text from Marco, or maybe a spam. Instead, it was an unknown number. The message was simple. 8 o'clock, come alone. Isabella stared at the screen. She should delete it, block the number, pretend she'd never seen it. Instead, she saved the contact under a single initial M. At 7:30, Isabella left the apartment. Gina was back on the couch, drinking something that definitely wasn't coffee, and didn't look up when Isabella walked past. The financial district was only 3 miles away, but it felt like a different city. The streets were cleaner. The buildings were taller. The people walking past looked like they'd never had to choose between eating and paying rent, between pride and survival. The apartment building was everything the lease had promised. Modern, secure, the kind of place where you needed a key card just to get into the lobby. Isabella stood outside for a full minute, staring at the glass doors before she finally pushed through. The doorman looked up from his desk. "Can I help you? I'm here to see someone." "Leo Moretti." The doorman's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Recognition, maybe respect, maybe fear. Penthouse level. Elevators to your right. You'll need this. He handed her a key card. It's programmed for tonight only. Isabella took the card. Her hand was shaking. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, which meant Isabella had to watch herself during the entire ride up. She looked small, young, out of place in her second-hand coat and worn jeans. The bandage on her hand was stark white against her skin. The doors opened directly into the apartment. Isabella stepped out and stopped. The space was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, light stretching out in every direction like a constellation brought to Earth. The furniture was modern, but somehow still warm, all clean lines and soft textures. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel and marble countertops. Everything was perfect, untouched, waiting. "You came." Isabella spun around. Leo Moretti stood in the doorway to what must have been the bedroom, wearing a dark sweater and jeans, casual clothes that somehow didn't make him look any less dangerous. If anything, seeing him like this, relaxed at home, was more unsettling than the suit had been. "I came to tell you I'm not taking this," Isabella said. "All right." He walked into the living room, gesturing for her to follow. "Tell me." Isabella stayed where she was. "I don't need your help. We've established that you think you don't, but you do." "Stop saying that." "Why? It's true." He leaned against the back of the couch, arms crossed, watching her with that same intense focus that made her feel stripped bare. "You're 18 years old, working a job that barely pays minimum wage, living in a building that should have been condemned years ago. You're an alcoholic with a gambling problem who drags you into debt you'll never be able to pay off on your own. You skipped your last 2 meals. You haven't bought new clothes in over a year. The shoes you're wearing have holes in them." Isabella looked down. He was right. The soles of her sneakers were worn through on one side, and she'd been using duct tape to keep them together. "So yes, Isabella, you need help. The only question is whether you're going to accept it or keep pretending you can survive on pride and stubbornness. Why do you care?" The question came out raw than she'd intended. "You don't know me." "Not really. Watching someone for 2 years doesn't mean you know them. You're wrong." He pushed off the couch and closed the distance between them in 3 strides. Isabella's instinct was to back up, but the elevator doors were right behind her. "Nowhere to go. I know you take the long way home to avoid the corner where those men attacked you. I know you give half your tips to the homeless man who sleeps behind the bakery. I know you haven't cried in 11 months, not even when your aunt broke your phone in a drunken rage. I know you're terrified of being seen, but you're even more terrified of disappearing completely." Isabella's breath caught. "Stop. I know you want someone to notice you, to care, to tell you that you matter." His voice dropped lower. "And I'm telling you, you matter to me. You don't get to decide that. I already have. That's not how this works." "Then tell me how it works, Isabella." He was close enough now that she could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his jaw tightened when she pushed back. "Tell me what you want, because I know what you need, and I know you're not getting it. So tell me, what do you actually want?" The question broke something open inside her. All the exhaustion, all the fear, all the anger at a life that had never given her a choice about anything. It came flooding out. "I want to stop being so tired," she said, her voice shaking. "I want to eat without feeling guilty about it. I want to sleep without worrying about whether I'll have a place to live tomorrow. I want to feel safe just once, just for a minute. I want to stop fighting so hard just to exist." "Then stop fighting," Leo said quietly. "Let me at what cost? Does it matter?" "Yes." He studied her for a long moment. Then he reached out and gently took her bandaged hand. Isabella flinched but didn't pull away. "The cost," he said, "is that you let me take care of you. You move into this apartment. You quit that job. You let me make sure you're safe and fed and not working yourself to death for pennies. In return, you stay. You don't run. You don't disappear. You let me keep you close. That sounds like a prison, does it?" He turned her hand over, his thumb brushing carefully over the bandage. "Or does it sound like the first time in your life someone's offering to carry the weight instead of adding to it?" Isabella wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she could handle everything on her own, that she didn't need him or anyone else, but the lie wouldn't come. "I don't trust you," she whispered. "I know. I don't even like you. That's fair. And I definitely don't belong to you, no matter what you think." Leo's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We'll see about that." He let go of her hand and stepped back, giving her space to breathe. The apartment is yours, whether you take it tonight or tomorrow or next week. The key card works anytime. Margaret can help you move whenever you're ready. But Isabella, he waited until she met his eyes. Your landlord's eviction papers are real. You have 2 weeks. After that, you're out on the street. So, you can take this apartment with your pride intact, or you can take it after you've exhausted every other option and proven to yourself that I was right. Either way, you're going to end up here. You're so sure of that. I am. He walked to the door and held it open, because I know you better than you think. And I know that when you stop running long enough to actually look at what I'm offering, you'll see it for what it is. And what is it? A chance, he said simply. To live instead of just survive. Isabella walked to the elevator. Her legs felt like they might give out, but she made it. The doors opened and she stepped aside, then turned to face him. I'll think about it, she said. Take your time. Leo's pale eyes held hers as the doors began to close. I'm not going anywhere. The elevator descended and Isabella leaned against the mirrored wall, closing her eyes. He was right. She knew he was right. The apartment was better than anything she could afford on her own. The safety, the security, the promise of not having to fight for every scrap. It was more than she'd ever dared to want. But it came with strings, invisible ones maybe. But she could feel them already wrapping around her wrists, her throat, her chest. Stay. Don't run. Let me keep you close. Not a cage. Not quite. But not freedom either. The elevator doors opened, and Isabella walked through the lobby without looking at the doorman. She stepped out onto the street and started walking. No destination in mind, just movement to keep the panic at bay. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it out. Another message from M. The offer stands always. Isabella stared at the words for a long time. Then she typed back, I need more time. The response came immediately. You have until the eviction. After that, I'm coming to get you myself. Isabella shoved the phone in her pocket and kept walking. She didn't go home. Instead, she walked until her feet ached and the streets started to empty out, until the only people left were the ones who had nowhere else to go. She walked past the bakery, past the corner where those men had attacked her 2 years ago, past all the places that had marked the boundaries of her small, struggling life. And when she finally stopped, she found herself standing outside the building with the penthouse apartment, looking up at the lights on the top floor. He was up there waiting, certain that eventually she'd give in. And the worst part, the part that scared her more than anything else, was that he was probably right. Isabella pulled out her phone and stared at Margaret Chen's number for a long minute. Then she made the call. Miss Rossi, Margaret answered on the second ring. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I need to see the apartment again, Isabella said. Tomorrow before I make a decision. Of course. What time works for you? After my shift, 3 o'clock. I'll meet you in the lobby. Margaret paused. For what it's worth, Miss Rossi, I think you're making the right choice. I haven't made a choice yet. Yes, Margaret said gently. You have. You just haven't admitted it. She hung up before Isabella could respond. Isabella stood on the empty street, phone in hand, and let the truth settle over her like a coat she'd been refusing to wear. Margaret was right. Leo was right. Even Marco, in his own blunt way, had been right. She was going to take the apartment. She was going to let Leo Moretti pull her out of the life that was slowly killing her. She was going to accept help from a man who terrified her, who'd been watching her for years, who spoke about her like she was something precious he'd been waiting to claim. And maybe, just maybe, that was the smartest decision she'd ever made. Or maybe it was the moment everything started to spiral completely out of her control. Isabella didn't know which, but as she started the long walk back to her crumbling apartment for what might be one of the last times, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just stepped off a cliff. All she could do now was hope that Leo Moretti would catch her before she hit the ground, or that the fall would be worth it. Either way, the move happened faster than Isabella expected. Margaret showed up at the apartment 2 days later with a moving crew, 3 men in matching uniforms who packed Isabella's entire life into 4 boxes in less than an hour. It should have been humiliating, the physical proof of how little she owned. But Isabella was too numb to feel much of anything. She watched them wrap her clothes, her books, the few photographs she had of her parents, and felt like she was observing someone else's life being dismantled. Gina didn't help. She sat on the couch with a bottle and watched the whole process with glassy eyes. Occasionally muttering something, Isabella couldn't quite hear. When the last box was loaded, Isabella stood in the doorway of the apartment that had never felt like home and looked at her aunt. "You can still come," Isabella said. "There's space. 3 bedrooms." Gina took a long drink. "I'm not going to live in a cage just because it's got nice furniture. It's not a cage. Keep telling yourself that, sweetheart." Gina's laugh was bitter. "You think he's doing this out of kindness? Men like Leo Moretti don't do kind things. They invest and eventually they collect." Isabella's jaw tightened. "At least I won't be living in a place where the heat doesn't work and the landlord's threatening eviction every other week. No, you'll just be living with a man who thinks he owns you." The word stung more than Isabella wanted to admit. She grabbed her backpack, the only thing she'd insisted on carrying herself, and walked out without saying goodbye. The apartment building looked different in daylight, less intimidating somehow, but also more real. This wasn't a late-night conversation in an elevator anymore. This was her new address, her new life. The doorman, a different one from the night she'd met Leo, nodded at her like he'd been expecting her. "Miss Rossi, welcome. I'm James. Anything you need, just let me know." "Thank you," Isabella managed. The moving crew had already taken the boxes upstairs. Margaret was waiting in the lobby with a tablet and a smile that was probably meant to be reassuring. "The movers are unpacking now," Margaret said. "But if you'd rather arrange things yourself, I can send them away." "No, it's fine. I don't have much anyway." "Well, the apartment is fully furnished, so you won't need much." Margaret pulled up something on her tablet. "I've set up accounts for you at 3 grocery stores that deliver. There's a gym on the 2nd floor, pool on the roof, and a business center if you need computer access. Building maintenance is available 24/7. Mr. Moretti has also arranged for— Is he here?" Isabella interrupted. Margaret paused. "No, he thought you might want time to settle in without an audience." Isabella wasn't sure if she felt relieved or disappointed. "Both. Maybe. When will I see him?" "He'll be by this evening, around 7, if that works for you." It wasn't really a question. Okay. The elevator ride up felt longer than it had the first time. Isabella watched the numbers climb and tried to convince herself this was the right decision. Safe. Warm. No more worrying about money or food, or whether Gina's latest boyfriend was going to steal the last $20 Isabella had hidden in her sock drawer. This was good. This was what she needed. So why did it feel like she was walking toward the edge of something she couldn't see? The elevator doors opened, and Isabella stepped into the apartment. It looked exactly the same as before, perfect and untouched. Except now there were 4 boxes stacked neatly in the living room, with her name written on them and black marker. The movers were gone. It was just Isabella alone in a space that cost more per month than she'd made in the last year. She walked to the windows and looked out at the city. From up here, everything looked clean, organized, like someone had taken all the chaos and poverty and desperation and hidden it under glass and steel and careful planning. Isabella pressed her palm against the window, feeling the cold seep through, and tried to remember what it felt like to wake up, not knowing if she'd have a place to sleep that night. The feeling was already fading. She spent the afternoon unpacking. It didn't take long. 4 boxes worth of belongings didn't fill much space in an apartment this size. Her clothes looked ridiculous, hanging in the walk-in closet. A few shirts and 2 pairs of jeans lost in a space designed for someone who actually had a wardrobe. The bathroom had more counter space than her entire old apartment had floor space. The kitchen was stocked with things Isabella had only seen in cooking shows. A stand mixer, matching pots and pans, a knife block that probably cost more than a month of her old wages. She made herself a sandwich around 3 and ate it, standing at the counter because sitting at the dining table felt too formal. The bread was fresh. The turkey wasn't the processed stuff she was used to. Everything tasted expensive. Isabella finished half the sandwich and threw the rest away. Her stomach had shrunk over the past year, adjusting to irregular meals and small portions. Eating a full meal made her feel sick now. She was washing the plate when her phone rang. Unknown number. Isabella almost didn't answer, but then she remembered that Leo had texted her from an unknown number too, and if she was going to live in his apartment, she probably needed to take his calls. "Hello, Isabella." Not Leo. The voice was younger, male, with an accent Isabella couldn't quite place. "I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Moretti. He wanted to confirm that you moved in successfully. I'm here." "Good. He also wanted me to inform you that a stylist will be arriving tomorrow at 10 o'clock. She'll be taking measurements for new clothes. Isabella's grip on the phone tightened. I don't need new clothes. Mr. Moretti disagrees. I don't care what Mr. Moretti thinks I have clothes. There was a pause. Then the voice said more carefully, I'll pass along your feedback, but the stylist will still arrive at 10 o'clock. What you do with her is your decision. The call ended before Isabella could respond. She stared at the phone, anger, and something else. Something that felt uncomfortably like being managed rising in her chest. This was what Gina had warned her about. The cage with nice furniture. The pretty prison where someone else made all the decisions and called it care. Isabella grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. She didn't have a plan, just a desperate need to get out to prove to herself that she could still leave if she wanted to. But when she tried the elevator, the doors didn't open. She pressed the button again. Nothing. Her heart started to race. She pulled out her phone and called the number that had just contacted her. He answered on the first ring. Miss Rossi, the elevator's not working. It's working fine. Then why won't the doors open? Because Mr. Moretti asked me to disable your access until he arrives this evening. Isabella's blood went cold. You locked me in. For your safety, there have been some complications today that Mr. Moretti is handling, and he thought it best if you stayed inside until let me out. I can't do that. Yes, you can. You just disabled it, which means you can enable it, so do it now. Another pause. Miss Rossi, I understand you're upset. But Isabella hung up and resisted the urge to throw her phone across the room. Instead, she walked to the door that led to the building's stairwell. Locked. She tried the windows. They didn't open. Safety features for a penthouse, probably to prevent jumpers or break-ins. She was trapped. Not in danger, not uncomfortable, but completely, utterly trapped. Isabella sank onto the couch and pulled her knees to her chest. This was it. This was what Gina had tried to warn her about. The moment when she realized that Leo Moretti's protection was just another word for control. She sat there for an hour, rage and fear and exhaustion cycling through her in waves. By the time she heard the elevator doors open, she'd moved past anger into something colder, something that felt like clarity. Leo stepped out, still wearing the dark coat from the first day they'd met, and stopped when he saw her face. You locked me in, Isabella said. I did. Why? Because I needed you safe while I dealt with something that could have become your problem. What problem? Leo shrugged off his coat and draped it over a chair. Your aunt's former creditors aren't happy that their debts were paid off by someone else. They've been asking questions, making noise. I needed to make it clear that you're under my protection now, and that anyone who touches you answers to me. Isabella stood up. And you thought locking me in here was a good way to do that? I thought keeping you out of sight while I had a conversation with dangerous men was a smart way to do that. Yes, you didn't ask. Would you have agreed? That's not the point. Yes, it is. Leo moved closer, and Isabella forced herself not to step back. The point is that you're here because I promised to keep you safe. That means sometimes I'm going to make decisions you don't like, decisions that feel like I'm taking away your freedom. But the alternative is letting you walk into situations you don't understand with people who would hurt you without thinking twice. I've been taking care of myself for years, barely. You've been surviving, Isabella. There's a difference. He was close enough now that she could see the tension in his jaw. The way his hands were clenched at his sides, like he was fighting the urge to reach for her. And survival isn't good enough anymore. Not for you. You don't get to decide what's good enough for me. Someone has to, because you've been setting the bar so low that just making it to tomorrow counts as success. The words hit like a slap. Isabella's throat tightened. I want the elevator codes. No. This isn't a negotiation. You're right. It's not. Leo's voice was quiet but implacable. You can be angry. You can hate me for this. But I'm not giving you the codes until I know you're not going to do something stupid the second I turn my back. Stupid like what? Leaving, going for a walk, living my life? Stupid like going back to that apartment to check on your aunt. Stupid like walking through neighborhoods where people now know you're connected to me. Stupid like thinking you can just slip back into your old life and pretend none of this happened. He caught her wrist gently but firmly enough that she couldn't pull away. You're in my world now, Isabella, and my world has rules. Rule number 1, you don't put yourself in danger. Even if you think you're just going for a walk, Isabella yanked her arm free. And if I don't like your rules, then we'll fight about them constantly, but you'll still follow them. You're insane. Maybe. Something almost like amusement flickered across his face. But you're still here, because you locked me in. No, you're still here because some part of you knows I'm right. You're just too stubborn to admit it yet. Isabella wanted to scream. She wanted to throw something. Instead, she turned and walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the glass. The city stretched out below, and from up here, she could see the neighborhood where she'd spent the last year. The bakery was too small to make out, but she knew where it was. 14 blocks south, 3 blocks west. She could probably walk there in 20 minutes if the elevator wasn't locked. How long? She asked without turning around. How long? What? How long am I locked in here? Until I'm sure the message has been received. A few days, maybe a week at most. Isabella closed her eyes. A week? 7 days trapped in a gilded cage with a man who thought he could make decisions for her because he decided she was his. I want to see my aunt, she said. No, Leo, she's part of the problem. Isabella, every time you go back there, you get pulled into her mess. The drinking, the men, the debts. I'm not letting you go back to that. She's my family. She's an anchor, and if you're not careful, she's going to drag you down with her. Leo's reflection appeared in the window behind her. I had someone check on her this morning. She's fine. The rent's paid through the end of the month. After that, she'll need to figure out her own situation. Isabella spun around. You're just going to abandon her? I'm not responsible for your aunt. I'm responsible for you. I didn't ask you to be responsible for me, and yet, here we are. He studied her face with that same intensity that made her feel exposed. You're angry. I understand that. But anger doesn't change the reality. You needed help. I provided it. And part of that help means protecting you from the things that were destroying you, including your aunt. She's not a thing. No, she's a person who's been using you as a crutch for years. Someone had to cut you free. The truth in his words made Isabella's chest ache. She wanted to argue, to defend Gina, to insist that family meant something even when it was messy and complicated and painful. But she couldn't because he was right. Gina had been using her, taking her money, her time, her energy, and giving nothing back except more problems to solve. I hate you, Isabella whispered. I know. I hate that you're right. I know that too. Leo moved closer, and this time Isabella didn't have the energy to back away. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture oddly gentle. You'll adjust. It won't feel like a cage forever. What will it feel like? Home, he said simply. If you let it. Isabella searched his face, looking for signs of manipulation or cruelty or anything that would confirm that Gina had been right about him. But all she saw was certainty, absolute unshakable certainty that this was where she belonged. And that terrified her more than anything else. The stylist comes tomorrow at 10 o'clock, Leo said, stepping back. You don't have to let her measure you if you don't want to, but your clothes are falling apart, Isabella. You deserve better. I don't want your money. Too bad. You're getting it anyway. He picked up his coat. I have a meeting tonight. I'll be back around 11 o'clock to check on you. The kitchen is fully stocked. If you need anything, call Margaret. I want the elevator codes. No, Leo. No. He paused at the elevator. I'm not your enemy, Isabella. I know it feels like I am right now, but I'm not. I'm the only person who's fighting for you instead of against you. Remember that. The elevator doors closed, and Isabella was alone again. She stood in the middle of the perfect apartment, with its perfect furniture and perfect view, and felt the walls closing in. This was her life now. This was the price of safety. No more hunger, no more fear, no more exhaustion. Just control. Just someone else deciding what she needed, where she went, who she saw. Isabella walked to her bedroom, the room she'd barely looked at earlier, and opened the closet. Her few clothes hung there, pathetic and shabby, next to the empty space, waiting to be filled with whatever the stylist brought tomorrow. She pulled out the hoodie she'd worn on the day Leo had walked into the bakery and held it to her face. It smelled like flour and rain, and the cheap detergent from the laundromat on 3rd Street. It smelled like her old life. Isabella sat on the floor of the closet, still holding the hoodie, and finally let herself cry. She cried for the life she'd lost, for the aunt who'd never really been there, for the version of herself who'd thought survival was the same thing as living. She cried until her throat was raw, and her eyes were swollen, and she had nothing left. When she finally pulled herself together, It was dark outside. The city lights glittered below like promises of things she couldn't name. Isabella stood up, washed her face, and made herself a cup of tea in the kitchen that cost more than her old apartment security deposit. The tea was good, expensive, the kind she'd never been able to afford. She drank it, standing at the window watching the city, and tried to figure out who she was going to be now that she wasn't fighting just to survive. The next morning, the stylist arrived exactly at 10 o'clock. Isabella almost didn't answer the door. The intercom buzzed and she stared at it for a full minute before finally pressing the button. "Yes, Miss Rossi, I'm Sophia. Mr. Moretti sent me." Isabella closed her eyes. Of course he did. Come up. Sophia was younger than Isabella expected, maybe late 20s, with sharp eyes and an efficiency that suggested she'd done this 1,000 times before. She had 3 assistants with her, all carrying garment bags and boxes. "I understand you're not thrilled about this," Sophia said, as her team set up what looked like a mobile boutique in Isabella's living room. "But I promise we'll make it as painless as possible, and at the end of it you'll have clothes that actually fit." "I like my clothes." Sophia glanced at the hoodie Isabella was wearing. The same one from last night. They're very lived in. That's a polite way of saying they're falling apart. "I'm always polite." Sophia smiled. "Now, let's start with measurements, and then we'll talk about what styles you like. Unless you want me to just pick everything. I don't want any of this. But you're going to do it anyway." Isabella sighed. "Yeah, then we might as well make it fun." It wasn't fun. It was exhausting. Sophia measured every part of Isabella's body, asked questions about colors and fabrics and styles that Isabella had no opinions on, and somehow managed to make the whole process feel less like shopping and more like an interrogation. By the time they were done, Isabella's head was pounding, and she wanted to crawl back into bed. "We'll have everything ready in 3 days," Sophia said as her team packed up. "Casual wear, professional pieces, a few evening options. Mr. Moretti mentioned you might need a dress for an event next month." "What event?" "I'm not sure. He didn't give details, but I'll make sure you have options." Sophia paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Miss Rossi, I've been dressing people for the Moretti family for 5 years. Leo's never done this for anyone before. Usually, he just tells me to charge whatever his date wants to his account and calls it a day. But he sent me photos, notes about what colors he thinks you'd like, requests for practical pieces that would make you feel comfortable. He's paying attention. Whatever else you think about him, remember that." The door closed before Isabella could respond. She spent the rest of the day reading. The apartment had a bookshelf full of classics. Probably came with the furniture, and Isabella pulled down a battered copy of Janir because it seemed fitting. Girl meets mysterious man with dark secrets and questionable decision-making skills. At least Jane had eventually gotten some agency in her own story. Isabella was halfway through when the elevator opened, and Leo walked in. It was only 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Isabella hadn't expected him until later. "You're early," she said, without looking up from her book. Meeting ended early. He set his briefcase down and loosened his tie. "How is the stylist?" "Invasive." "Sophia is good at her job. I don't want new clothes. We've established that." He sat down in the chair across from her. "We've also established that you're getting them anyway." Isabella finally looked up. Leo was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Not quite concern, not quite satisfaction. Something in between. "Why are you really doing this, Bai?" she asked. "And don't tell me it's because you think I need help. Rich guys don't just rescue broke girls out of kindness." "So what do I want, you?" The word hung in the air between them. "You want me?" Isabella repeated slowly. "Yes." "As what? A girlfriend? A mistress?" "Some kind of as my wife." Isabella's book fell from her hands. Leo didn't move, didn't react, just kept watching her with that same steady gaze. "I want you as my wife, not right away. You need time to adjust to understand what this life entails. But eventually, yes, that's what I want." Isabella couldn't breathe. "You're insane. We've covered that already. I've known you for 3 days. I've known you for 2 years. That's not the same thing." Isabella stood up, needing to move, to do something other than sit there while her entire world tilted sideways. "You can't just decide you want to marry someone you've been stalking. Didn't decide 3 days ago. I decided the night I pulled those men off you in that alley." Leo stood too, matching her movement. "I saw you fighting, refusing to give up, even though you were outmatched and terrified. I saw the way you got back up when any sane person would have stayed down. And I knew what? That you were mine. That I'd do whatever it took to keep you. That eventually I'd make you understand you belonged with me. Isabella shook her head. That's not love. That's obsession. Call it what you want. Doesn't change the facts. The fact that you're completely delusional. The fact that you're still here, like he closed the distance between them in 2 strides. The fact that you took this apartment, that you let Sophia measure you, that you didn't fight me when I disabled the elevator. You're angry. Yes, but you're not trying to leave because you won't let me leave. I wouldn't stop you if you really wanted to go. His voice was quiet, certain. You're not a prisoner, Isabella. You're someone I'm protecting. There's a difference. And deep down, you know that. Isabella's hands were shaking. You don't love me. You don't even know me. I know you better than you think. I know you're terrified of being vulnerable. I know you'd rather starve than ask for help. I know you've spent so long being invisible that being seen feels dangerous. He reached out and cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. I know you're strong and stubborn and so tired of fighting. And I know that when you stop being afraid long enough to actually look at what I'm offering, you'll see it's not a cage. It's a chance to be more than what survival made you. Isabella's breath hitched. She wanted to pull away. She wanted to tell him he was wrong about everything, but the words wouldn't come. I don't want to marry you, she whispered. Not yet, Leo agreed. You will. What makes you so sure? Because you're smart enough to recognize when someone actually sees you. And I see you, Isabella. Every part. The broken pieces, the scared pieces, the pieces you try to hide. I see all of it. And I want it anyway. His hand was still on her face, warm and solid. And Isabella hated how much she wanted to lean into it. Hated how much she wanted to believe him. This is crazy, she said. Probably. You're asking me to marry someone I barely know. I'm telling you that eventually you'll marry me. There's a difference. His lips curved slightly. But I'm patient. Take your time. Get used to being here. Learn who I am. And when you're ready, we'll have this conversation again. And if I never agree, Leo's expression shifted, something darker flickering behind his eyes. Then I'll wait for as long as it takes. But make no mistake, Isabella, you're mine. Whether it takes months or years for you to accept that is up to you, but the end result is the same. He dropped his hand and stepped back, giving her space to breathe. I have another meeting tonight, he said, his tone casual again, like they'd been discussing the weather instead of marriage. I'll be back around midnight. There's dinner in the fridge. Margaret left instructions for reheating. I'm not hungry. Eat anyway. He picked up his briefcase. And Isabella, start thinking about what you want. I want to leave. No? You don't. You want to feel like you're in control. So, take control. Tell me what you need. Not what you think you should want or what you think I want to hear what you actually need. The elevator doors opened. Leo stepped inside and turned to face her. Think about it, he said. We'll talk tomorrow. The doors closed and Isabella was alone again, with his words echoing in her head. What did she need? Safety, security, food in her stomach, and a place to sleep without fear. She needed to not be exhausted all the time. To not wake up every morning already dreading the day ahead. She needed exactly what Leo was offering, and that terrified her more than anything else. Because accepting what he offered meant accepting him, his control, his certainty that she belonged to him, his absolute conviction that eventually she'd be his wife. Isabella picked up her book from where it had fallen and tried to keep reading. But the words blurred together, and all she could think about was the way Leo had looked at her when he said she was his. Like, it was already decided, like her opinion was just a formality. Like he knew something about her future that she hadn't figured out yet. She read the same page 3 times before giving up and going to bed. Tomorrow, she told herself she'd figure it out tomorrow. But as she lay in the dark in a bed that was too soft and sheets that were too expensive, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was nothing to figure out. Leo had already decided, and whether she liked it or not, Isabella was starting to believe he might be right. The week passed in a strange kind of suspension, like Isabella was living in someone else's life, and waiting for the real owner to come back and claim it. She woke up each morning in sheets that cost more than her old monthly rent, ate breakfast she didn't have to ration, and spent her days reading or staring out the windows at a city that looked cleaner from 40 floors up. Leo came and went. Sometimes he stayed for dinner, sitting across from her at the dining table and asking questions about her day, like they were a normal couple instead of a captor and his unwilling guest. Sometimes he didn't come home until after midnight, and Isabella would hear the elevator doors open from her bedroom and know he was checking to make sure she was still there. She always was, not because she couldn't leave. On the third day, Margaret had quietly given her an elevator key card without Leo's knowledge, whispering that every cage should have an emergency exit, but because Isabella didn't know where she'd go. Back to the apartment where Gina was probably already behind on rent again. To the bakery where Marco had stopped returning her texts. To the streets where people now knew she was connected to Leo Moretti, which made her either untouchable or a target, depending on who was asking. So she stayed and hated herself a little more each day for how easy it was getting. The new clothes arrived on schedule. Sophia and her team swept in with racks of garments that actually fit. Colors that didn't wash Isabella out. Fabrics that felt like they belonged on someone who mattered. Isabella tried on a navy blue dress that hugged her body in ways her old clothes never had. And when she looked in the mirror, she almost didn't recognize herself. "You look beautiful," Sophia said, adjusting the hem. Mr. Moretti was right about the color. "It suits you." Isabella stared at her reflection. The girl, looking back, didn't look like someone who'd been invisible her whole life. She looked like someone worth noticing. "I look like I'm playing dress-up. You look like yourself, just better dressed." Sophia smiled. "There's a difference between hiding and being comfortable, Miss Rossi. These clothes, they're the latter." After Sophia left, Isabella hung everything in the closet and went back to wearing her old hoodie. It felt like rebellion, a small, pathetic rebellion, but it was hers. That night, Leo noticed immediately. "The clothes didn't fit," he asked, nodding at her hoodie as he set down his briefcase. "They fit fine." "Then why aren't you wearing them?" "Because I don't want to." Leo studied her for a moment, then shrugged. "All right." Isabella blinked. "All right, that's it. You think I'm going to force you to wear clothes you don't want to wear? You were forced to get them in the first place. I provided options. What you do with them is your choice." He loosened his tie and headed toward the kitchen. "Are you hungry? I'm making pasta. You cook?" "Surprising, I know." The terrifying crime boss knows his way around a kitchen. There was amusement in his voice. "Yes, Isabella, I cook. I also do my own laundry and know how to change a tire." Shocking revelations all around. Despite herself, Isabella followed him into the kitchen. She'd barely been in there except to make tea or grab food from the fridge. The idea of Leo Moretti, the man who paid off $15,000 debts without blinking and owned half the city. Cooking pasta felt absurd, but he moved around the kitchen with easy competence, pulling out ingredients and setting water to boil like he'd done it 1,000 times. Isabella perched on one of the bar stools and watched, not sure what to do with this version of him. "You don't have to watch me like I'm about to poison you," Leo said without turning around. "How did you know I was watching?" "Because you've been staring at me for the past 5 minutes," he glanced over his shoulder. "If you're going to sit there, you might as well help. Can you dice tomatoes?" Isabella hesitated, then slid off the stool and joined him at the counter. He handed her a knife and a cutting board, and they worked in silence for a few minutes. It felt strangely domestic, normal in a way nothing else about her new life had been. "My mother taught me to cook," Leo said suddenly. Before she died, she said, "Men who couldn't themselves were useless." Isabella's hands stilled. "How old were you?" "I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago." He added garlic to the pan, and the smell filled the kitchen. "She would have liked you. You don't know that. She liked people who fought back. People who didn't roll over the second things, got hard." He turned the heat down and finally looked at her. "You remind me of her, actually. Same stubbornness, same refusal to accept help even when you clearly need it. Did she accept help?" Eventually, when she realized my father wasn't going to stop offering, Leo's expression softened slightly. He pursued her for 2 years. She told him no at least 100 times, but he knew what she needed even when she didn't. So, he waited. And when she finally said yes, they had 20 good years together before the cancer took her. Isabella's throat tightened. "Is that what you think this is? Some romantic story where you chase me until I give in? No. I think this is me recognizing someone who deserves better than what life's given her, and deciding to do something about it." He reached for the tomatoes she'd been cutting. The romance comes later if you want it. And if I don't, then we'll figure out something else, but you'll still be mine. That part's not negotiable. There it was again. That absolute certainty that made Isabella want to scream and cry and possibly throw something. Instead, she went back to cutting tomatoes and tried to ignore the way her chest ucked. They ate dinner together at the table. The pasta was good, better than anything Isabella could have made, and for a while, they didn't talk. Just ate in comfortable silence while the city lights sparkled below. I want to see my aunt, Isabella said, finally. Leo sat down his fork. We've talked about this. No, you've talked about it. I've just listened. She met his eyes. I know you think she's bad for me, and maybe you're right, but she's still family. I can't just cut her off, because you decided it's better for me. Even if cutting her off is better for you, that's my decision to make, not yours. Leo was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, I'll have a car take you tomorrow afternoon. 2 hours supervised. After that, we reassess. Supervised? You're not going into that neighborhood alone. Not with the situation still unsettled. What situation? The one where your aunt's former creditors are trying to figure out why Leo Moretti paid off a random girl's debts. The one where people are asking questions and making connections that could put you in danger. His tone was matter of fact. You want to see Gina? Fine. But you do it with security. That's the deal. Isabella wanted to argue, but the look in Leo's eyes told her this was as far as he was willing to bend. Fine. Good. He went back to his pasta. Now, tell me what you've been doing all week besides avoiding your new wardrobe. Reading, thinking, trying to figure out what the hell I'm doing here, and what have you figured out? Isabella pushed food around her plate. That I'm tired of fighting, that this apartment is nicer than anywhere I've ever lived. That you scare me, and I don't know if that's because you're dangerous, or because part of me wants to believe everything you're saying. Both, probably. Leo's voice was quiet. I am dangerous, Isabella. I won't lie about that. But not to you. Never to you. How can you be so sure? Because hurting you would be like hurting myself. And I'm not that self-destructive. The words should have sounded ridiculous, over the top, like something from a bad romance novel. But Leo said them with such simple conviction that Isabella almost believed him. Almost. The next afternoon, a black car arrived to take Isabella to see Gina. The driver was the same man from before, the one with silver hair and a weathered face. And there was another man in the passenger seat, younger, built like he spent his life in a gym, with a gun visible under his jacket. Isabella climbed into the back seat and tried not to think about the fact that she needed armed guards to visit her own aunt. The drive took 15 minutes. Isabella watched familiar streets pass by, and with each block, she felt the weight of her old life settling back onto her shoulders, the boarded-up shops, the people huddled in doorways, the sense that everything here was just barely holding together. This was what she'd escaped. This was what Leo had pulled her out of. The car stopped in front of her old building. Isabella got out before anyone could help her, ignoring the way the younger guard tensed and climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. The hallway smelled the same, mildew and cigarettes and desperation. She knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again louder. Gina, it's me, Isabella. The door opened. Gina stood there in a stained robe, her hair unwashed, her eyes bloodshot. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the week since Isabella had left. So, you came back? Gina said, I figured you'd forgotten about me by now. Can I come in? Gina stepped aside. The apartment looked worse than when Isabella had left. Empty bottles covered every surface. The sink was full of dirty dishes. There was a smell Isabella couldn't identify and didn't want to. Nice dress, Gina said, gesturing at the simple black dress Sophia had picked out. Guess the cage came with a wardrobe. I came to see if you're okay. Do I look okay? Gina laughed, a harsh sound that turned into a cough. I lost my job. Rent's due in 3 days. But hey, at least I'm not living with a psychopath who thinks he owns people. Isabella's jaw tightened. He doesn't own me. Keep telling yourself that, sweetheart. Meanwhile, you're wearing his clothes, living in his apartment, probably sleeping in his bed. I'm not sleeping with him yet. Gina grabbed a bottle off the counter, whiskey from the label, and took a drink straight from it. But you will. That's how this works. He buys you pretty things, makes you feel special, and eventually you'll convince yourself you want him, that you chose this. Maybe I did choose this. You were scared and desperate, and he took advantage. That's not choice. That's coercion. Isabella wanted to argue. She wanted to explain that Leo had given her options, that she could have walked away, that she'd made the decision herself. But looking at Gina, drunk at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, drowning in her own mess, Isabella realized something. Her aunt was right, and her aunt was also wrong. Leo had manipulated the situation. He paid off the debts, offered the apartment, made it impossible to say no without consequences. But he'd also seen her, actually seen her, when everyone else in Isabella's life had looked right through her, or only saw what they could take. "I'm not you," Isabella said quietly. Gina's eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm not going to spend the rest of my life drowning in bottles and bad decisions. It means I'm taking the help that's offered because I'm smart enough to know I need it." "Help, Isabella? He's isolating you, controlling you, making you dependent on him. That's not help. That's more than you ever did for me." The words came out harsher than Isabella intended, but once they were spoken, she couldn't take them back. "I spent a year working myself to death to pay off your debts while you drank and brought home strangers and didn't even notice I was barely surviving. So don't lecture me about coercion when you've been using me as your personal ATM for months." Gina's face went pale. "I'm your family." "No, you're my aunt. There's a difference." Isabella's voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. "Family would have noticed I was skipping meals. Family would have cared that I dropped out of school. Family would have done something other than add to my problems." "I tried." "No, you didn't. You just kept taking and expecting me to hold everything together while you fell apart." Isabella's hands were trembling. "I came here to check on you because I thought I owed you that, but I don't owe you anything. Not anymore." She turned toward the door. "Isabella, wait. I'll have someone send money for the rent," Isabella said without looking back. "After that, you're on your own. Figure it out or don't, but I'm done drowning with you." She walked out before Gina could respond. The guards were waiting in the hallway and they fell into step behind her as she descended the stairs. Isabella's chest felt tight, her eyes burning with tears. She refused to let fall, not here. Not where anyone could see. She made it to the car before the first sob broke free. The driver didn't say anything. Neither did the guard. They just let her cry. And when she finally pulled herself together 20 minutes later, they still didn't comment, just handed her tissues and drove her home. Home? When had she started thinking of the penthouse as home? Leo was waiting when she arrived. He took one look at her face and dismissed the guards with a gesture. "What happened?" he asked once they were alone. "I told my aunt I was done." Isabella's voice was hoarse from crying. "I told her she was on her own." "Good. Don't say that. Don't act like this is what you wanted. It's not about what I wanted. It's about what you needed." Leo guided her to the couch and sat beside her, not touching, just close enough that she could feel his presence. "She was using you, Isabella. Cutting her off was the right thing to do." "Then why does it feel like I just abandoned the only family I have left?" "Because you're a good person, and good people feel guilty even when they're doing the right thing." He was quiet for a moment. "My father told me once that the hardest part of building something better is leaving behind the people who want to keep you in the mess. Not because they're cruel, but because watching you rise reminds them they're still sinking." Isabella wiped her eyes. "Your father sounds like he was wise. He was, and stubborn, and absolutely certain about the things that mattered." Leo's lips curved slightly. "You would have liked him too. Stop doing that." "Doing what?" "Acting like I'm going to be part of your family. Like this is permanent." "It is permanent, Isabella. Whether you accept that today or a year from now, you're mine, and I take care of what's mine." Isabella closed her eyes. She was too exhausted to fight, too raw from the confrontation with Gina to muster the energy to argue. So she just sat there, and when Leo shifted closer and pulled her against his side, she let him. They stayed like that for a long time. Isabella curled into Leo's warmth, his arm around her shoulders while the city darkened outside and the lights below began to glow. "Oh, I'm scared," Isabella whispered. "Of what?" "That you're right. That I'm starting to believe this is where I belong." She looked up at him. "What happens when I stop fighting? Then we start building something real." Leo's hand moved to her hair, fingers gentle as they combed through the strands. "You've spent your whole life fighting, Isabella. Don't you want to know what it feels like to rest? What if I forget how to fight?" "You won't. Fighting is part of who you are. But maybe you can fight for things that matter instead of just fighting to survive." The words settled over her like a blanket, heavy, but somehow comforting. Isabella let her eyes close, exhaustion finally catching up with her. I'm not ready, she said. To be yours, to get married, to any of it. I know, so why do you keep pushing? Because you need someone to push. Someone to tell you it's okay to want more than you've been settling for. His voice was quiet. I'll wait as long as you need, Isabella. But I won't let you hide forever. Isabella didn't have an answer for that. She just let herself drift, held by someone who saw her, even when she tried to disappear, and tried not to think about how easy it was getting to lean on him. She woke up hours later, in her own bed, still wearing the black dress, with a blanket pulled over her. Leo must have carried her. The thought should have bothered her, being moved without her knowledge, handled like she was something fragile. But mostly she just felt grateful she hadn't had to walk. Her phone was on the nightstand. 3 missed calls from Gina. Isabella ignored them and went to take a shower. The next week passed in a new rhythm. Isabella started wearing the clothes Sophia had picked out, not because Leo asked, but because her old clothes reminded her of a version of herself she didn't want to be anymore. She started eating regular meals, noticing with surprise when her jeans got tighter because her body was actually healthy enough to gain weight. She started sleeping through the night without nightmares about eviction notices or unpaid bills, and she started looking forward to dinner with Leo. It happened gradually. First, she just stopped avoiding him. Then, she started asking questions about his work, his life, the city he seemed to know so intimately. He answered everything, never deflecting or making her feel stupid for not knowing. And slowly, the man who terrified her started to become just a man. Complicated and intense, and yes, still dangerous, but also smart and funny in a dry way that caught her off guard. And surprisingly patient with her mood swings and occasional bursts of anger. You're different today, Leo observed. One night over dinner, Isabella looked up from her food. Different? How? Less like you're planning my murder. I'm still considering it. Just haven't decided on a method yet. Smart to take your time. Murder requires planning. His eyes crinkled slightly. But you're smiling now when you threaten me. That's progress. Isabella realized he was right. She was smiling. When had that started happening? Don't let it go to your head, she said. Too late. He reached across the table and caught her hand, his thumb brushing over her healed scar. The stitches had come out 3 days ago, leaving a thin line across her palm. You're adjusting, is that what we're calling it? You're happier, more rested, actually eating. His grip tightened slightly. You're starting to trust me. I don't. Isabella started to protest, but Leo shook his head. You do? Maybe not completely, but enough that you're not flinching every time I get close. Enough that you let me carry you to bed last week without waking up and panicking. Enough that you're here having dinner with me, instead of locked in your room pretending I don't exist. Isabella wanted to argue, but he was right. She did trust him. Or at least she was starting to, and that scared her more than anything else had. What if you're wrong about me? She asked quietly. What if I'm not the person you think I am? You're not. You're better. Leo released her hand and went back to his food, like he hadn't just said something that made Isabella's chest ache. The person I thought you were would have taken the apartment and never looked back, would have let me control everything without question. But you fight me. You push back. You tell me when you think I'm wrong. That's the person I actually want, not some fantasy, even when I'm difficult. Especially when you're difficult. Easy is boring, Isabella. I don't want easy. I want you. The words hung between them, heavy with promise and threat in equal measure. That night, Isabella lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had changed in 2 weeks. She'd gone from invisible to seeing, from starving to fed, from sleeping in a room the size of a closet to sleeping in a bedroom bigger than her old apartment. She'd gone from alone to whatever this was with Leo. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Isabella almost ignored it, but something made her open it. The message was short. You're in danger. They're coming for you tomorrow. Get out now. Isabella's blood went cold. She jumped out of bed and ran to the living room. Leo was still up working at the dining table with his laptop open and papers spread around him. Someone just texted me, Isabella said, holding out her phone. They said, I danger. Leo's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. He took the phone, read the message, and immediately pulled out his own phone. Marcus, he said when someone answered, we have a problem. Someone got Isabella's number. Yes, I know it's supposed to be secure. Obviously, they found a way. His voice went hard. I want the building on full lockdown. No one in or out without my clearance, and I want everyone on alert. If someone so much as looks at this building wrong, I want to know about it. He ended the call and looked at Isabella. Pack a bag. We're leaving. What? Where are we going? Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't think to look. He was already moving, grabbing his laptop and shoving papers into a briefcase. Now, Isabella, we don't have time to discuss this. Leo, what's happening? He stopped and turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her stomach drop. The people who wanted your aunt's debts collected? They're not happy. I interfered. They've been making moves. I thought I had it contained, but if they got your number, that means they're closer than I thought. So, they're coming here, probably, which is why we're not going to be here when they arrive. He grabbed her shoulders. Isabella, I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Isabella's heart was racing. Every instinct she developed on the streets was screaming at her to run, to get away, to not trust anyone. But when she looked at Leo, at the intensity in his eyes, the absolute determination to keep her safe, she realized something. She did trust him. Despite everything, despite the control and the obsession and the way he'd upended her entire life without asking, she trusted him. Okay, she said, I trust you. Something flashed in Leo's eyes. Relief maybe, or satisfaction. And then he was moving again, pulling her toward the bedroom. 5 minutes, he said. Grab whatever you can't live without. Everything else can be replaced. Isabella threw clothes into a bag with shaking hands while Leo made more calls. She heard him talking to someone named Thomas, giving instructions in a clipped, efficient tone that made it clear. This wasn't the first time he'd handled a situation like this. This was his world. Violence and danger, and people who sent threatening texts in the middle of the night. This was what Isabella had signed up for when she'd accepted his protection. And for the first time, she understood exactly what that meant. They took the service elevator down to the parking garage. 2 cars were waiting, one in front, one behind. Armed men Isabella had never seen before surrounded them as they walked to the middle car. Leo kept his hand on the small of her back, guiding her forward, his body angled to shield her from potential threats. Where are we going? Isabella asked once they were in the car. My family's estate outside the city. No one except my inner circle knows about it. Leo's jaw was tight. You'll be safe there. What about you? I'll be with you. No, Isabella grabbed his arm. Are you in danger too? I'm always in danger. Comes with the territory. He covered her hand with his. But right now, you're my priority. Once I know you're secure, I'll handle the rest. The drive took over an hour. Isabella watched the city lights fade behind them, replaced by darkness, and eventually the silhouettes of trees against the night sky. She'd never been this far outside the city. Never had a reason to leave. The estate appeared suddenly, set back from a private road, and surrounded by high walls. Gates opened as they approached, and then they were driving up a long driveway lined with trees. The house, if you could call it that, was enormous. Stone and glass and architectural details Isabella couldn't name in the dark. This is where you grew up? Isabella asked. Part of the time. My father had a place in the city, too. Leo's voice was neutral, but there was something underneath it. Memory, maybe, or loss. My mother loathed it here, said the city was too loud for her. They pulled up to the front entrance. More guards appeared, and Leo exchanged quick words with them before leading Isabella inside. The interior was warm, well lit, and expensively furnished in a way that felt lived in rather than staged. Family photos lined the hallway. Isabella caught glimpses of a younger Leo with his parents smiling in ways she'd never seen him smile. Second floor, 3rd door on the right, Leo said, guiding her up a curved staircase. That'll be your room. Mine is next door. We're not sharing. Not unless you want to. His hand tightened briefly on her back. You're here for protection, Isabella, not because I expect anything from you. The room was beautiful. A huge bed with soft linens, windows that overlooked dark gardens, a bathroom that was somehow bigger than her entire old apartment. Isabella set down her bag and turned to find Leo watching her from the doorway. How long will we be here? She asked. As long as it takes to neutralize the threat. Days? Weeks? I don't know yet. He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, Leo looked tired. Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning. Leo, wait. He paused, one hand on the doorframe. Thank you, Isabella said, for getting me out of there. for keeping me safe." His expression softened. "There's nowhere you could go that I wouldn't follow. Remember that?" He closed the door, and Isabella was alone in a room that cost more than most people's houses, in an estate owned by a man who'd just proven he'd move heaven and earth to protect her. She should have been terrified, should have been questioning every decision that had led her here. Instead, she climbed into bed and fell asleep almost immediately, feeling safer than she had in years. Because Leo Moretti had promised to keep her safe, and despite everything, despite the control and the obsession and the way he'd claimed her without asking, Isabella believed him. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. Isabella woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of birds she'd never heard in the city. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the previous night came flooding back. The text message, the rushed escape, Leo's hand steady on her back as armed men surrounded them. She sat up and looked around the room in daylight. It was even more beautiful than she'd realized. The walls were a soft cream color, and there were fresh flowers on the dresser. Someone had unpacked her bag while she slept, hanging her clothes in the closet and setting her toiletries in the bathroom. Isabella's phone showed 9:30. She'd slept for almost 10 hours. When was the last time that had happened? She found Leo in what appeared to be a library on the first floor, talking on his phone in a language Isabella didn't recognize. He looked up when she entered, held up one finger, and finished his conversation before hanging up. "You're awake?" he said. "Hungry? Starving?" "Kitchen's this way." The kitchen was massive, all marble and stainless steel, with windows overlooking gardens that stretched out in careful rows. A woman in her 60s was cooking something that smelled incredible, and she smiled when she saw Isabella. "Miss Rossi, I'm Rosa. I manage the house. Sit. I'll make you breakfast." "You don't have to, sir." "Nonsense. Mr. Leo already told me you don't eat enough. I'm fixing that." Rosa was already pulling out eggs and bread. "How do you like your eggs?" "However you make them is fine." Rosa beamed. "Good answer. You're polite, not like some of the girls he's brought here." Leo cleared his throat. "Rosa, what?" "I'm just saying this one has manners." Rosa cracked eggs into a pan, and she looks at you different than the others, like she actually sees you instead of just seeing your wallet. Isabella felt her face heat. We're not yet," Leo said calmly, pouring coffee. "But we will be." Rosa laughed. "There's that Moretti confidence just like your father. He told your mother they'd get married on their second date. She thought he was crazy." "Was he?" Isabella asked. "Absolutely, but he was also right." Rosa slid a plate of eggs, toast, and what looked like homemade sausage in front of Isabella. Sometimes crazy and right go together, especially with Moretti men. Isabella ate while Leo made more calls, speaking in English this time, but using terminology Isabella didn't understand. She caught words like perimeter, surveillance, and neutralized, and tried not to think too hard about what they meant. When she finished eating, Leo finally put down his phone. "Walk with me," he said. They went outside into gardens that were even more beautiful in daylight, roses, and hedges, and stone pathways that wound between flower beds. Isabella could see the walls in the distance, high enough to keep the world out. "The people who sent that text," Isabella said, "are they still a threat?" They were. Leo's jaw tightened. "Past tense. What does that mean?" "It means I handled it. They won't be bothering you again." Isabella stopped walking. "Leo, what did you do?" "What I had to do to keep you safe." He turned to face her. "These weren't reasonable people, Isabella. They weren't going to accept a buyout or a negotiation. They wanted to send a message by hurting you, so I sent one back." "By doing what? Do you really want to know?" Isabella opened her mouth, then closed it. Did she want to know? Did she want confirmation that the man who cooked her pasta and carried her to bed was also capable of violence she couldn't imagine? "No," she said finally. "I don't think I do. Smart." Leo started walking again. "But Isabella, you need to understand something. This is my world. Violence, threats, people who solve problems with blood instead of words. If you're going to be with me, really be with me. You need to accept that part of who I am. I'm not with you yet." He shot her a look. "But you're getting closer. I can tell." He was right. And that bothered her more than the violence did. Because somewhere in the past 3 weeks, Isabella had stopped seeing Leo as her captor and started seeing him as something else, someone else. A man who noticed when she wasn't eating, who remembered how she took her coffee, who looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world. What happens now? Isabella asked. We stay here for a few days. Make sure there are no loose ends. Then we go back to the city. And then Leo stopped at a stone bench and sat down, pulling Isabella down beside him. Then we keep doing what we've been doing. You adjust. I wait, and eventually you stop fighting the fact that you belong with me. What if I never stop fighting? Then I'll spend the rest of my life proving you wrong. His hand found hers, fingers threading through hers with a certainty that made her chest tight. I'm patient, Isabella. I can wait as long as it takes, even if it takes years. Even then, Isabella looked down at their joined hands. His were bigger, scarred across the knuckles in ways that suggested he'd use them for violence. But they were also gentle with her, always gentle. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? That I'm going to forget how to want anything else. That I'm going to get so used to this to you that I won't remember what it was like to make my own choices. Leo was quiet for a moment. Then he lifted her hand and pressed it against his chest, right over his heart. Feel that? Isabella nodded. His heartbeat was steady under her palm. That's yours, Leo said. Has been since the night I pulled those men off you. I didn't choose it any more than you chose to survive your childhood. It just is. He covered her hand with his. You think I'm taking away your choices? I'm giving you the only choice that matters. Stay with me. Let me love you. Build something better than what either of us had before. Everything else, where you go, what you do, who you become, that's up to you. But this, he pressed her hand harder against his chest. This is already decided. That's not how love works. Then tell me how it works, Isabella, because from where I'm standing, love is recognizing the person you can't live without and refusing to let them go. Love is also letting people make their own mistakes, letting them be free. You want freedom? Leo released her hand. Fine. There's a car in the garage. Keys are in the ignition. You can leave right now. I won't stop you. I won't follow. You can walk away from me, and I'll let you go. Isabella stared at him. You're lying. I'm not. His expression was serious. You want to prove you still have choices? Here's one. Leave right now. See if you can make it an hour without realizing you're running from the first person who's ever really seen you. Leo, no. You said you're scared of losing your ability to choose. So, choose. He stood up. The car is a black sedan. Tanks full. There's cash in the glove box. Enough to get you wherever you want to go. He walked away, leaving Isabella alone on the bench with her heart racing and her mind spinning. This was a test. It had to be some kind of manipulation to prove his point. Except Leo had never lied to her, never promised something he couldn't deliver. If he said she could leave, he meant it. Isabella stood up and walked toward the house, past Rosa in the kitchen, who smiled and didn't ask questions, past the library where Leo had been making calls, down a hallway to the garage. The black sedan was exactly where he'd said it would be. Keys in the ignition. She opened the glove box. Cash just like he'd promised. Enough to get her anywhere in the country if she wanted. Isabella sat in the driver's seat, with her hands on the steering wheel, and tried to imagine leaving. She'd go back to the city, find an apartment she could actually afford, maybe get her job back at the bakery, or find something similar. She'd be free, independent, making her own choices again. The thought made her feel hollow, because what would she be going back to? A life where she worked herself to exhaustion for pennies, where she ate one meal a day and called it enough, where nobody noticed if she was tired or hurt or slowly drowning. Leo noticed. Leo saw her. Leo had upended his entire life to keep her safe from threats she hadn't even known existed. And somewhere along the way, she'd stopped wanting to run from that. Isabella got out of the car and walked back to the house. She found Leo in his study, standing at the window with his back to the door. His shoulders were tense, and she realized he'd expected her to actually leave. He'd given her the choice, fully prepared for her to take it. I'm still here, Isabella said. Leo turned around. The relief on his face was so raw it made her chest ache. Why? He asked. Because you're right. I can't make it an hour without realizing I'd be running from the only person who's ever fought for me instead of against me. Isabella crossed the room until she was standing right in front of him. Because I'm tired of fighting. And because maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to believe you when you say, I belong with you. Leo's hands came up to cup her face, his touch reverent. Say it again. I belong with you. Do you mean it? Isabella searched his eyes and found the truth sitting heavy in her chest, impossible to deny anymore. Yes, I mean it. Leo kissed her. It wasn't the gentle, careful kiss she'd expected. It was hungry and desperate, like he'd been holding back for weeks and couldn't anymore. Isabella kissed him back with the same intensity, pouring all her confusion and fear and unexpected longing into it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Leo rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Isabella laughed, shaky and a little wild. "You're insane. We've established that. Marry me anyway." "Leo, it's been 3 weeks. I've wanted you for 2 years. 3 weeks? 2 years? 10 years? Doesn't change anything." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "Marry me, Isabella. Let me give you the life you deserve. I don't even know what that life looks like. Then we'll figure it out together." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm not asking you to stop fighting or stop questioning or stop being exactly who you are. I'm just asking you to do it with me as my wife." Isabella's throat was tight. "What if I say no? Then I'll ask again tomorrow, and the day after that until you say yes. That's harassment. That's persistence." His lips curved. "There's a difference." Isabella knew she should say no, should tell him they needed more time, that marriage was too big a step, that she wasn't ready. But when she looked at Leo, at the man who'd seen her when she was invisible, who'd protected her when she couldn't protect herself, who'd given her freedom, and then waited to see if she'd choose him, the word that came out was different. "Okay." Leo went very still. Okay. I'll marry you." Isabella felt like she was jumping off a cliff again, but this time she knew exactly who'd catch her. "Not because you're forcing me, not because I don't have other options, but because I want to. Because you're right. I do belong with you." The kiss this time was different, slower, deeper, full of promise instead of desperation. When Leo finally pulled back, he was smiling in a way Isabella had never seen. "We're getting married tomorrow," he said. "Tomorrow, Leo? I've waited 2 years. I'm not waiting another day." He was already pulling out his phone. "Rosa can handle the arrangements. We'll do it here in the garden. Small, just us and a few witnesses. What about my aunt?" Leo's expression shifted. "Do you want her there?" Isabella thought about Gina, about the woman who'd used her and ignored her and made her feel like a burden, about the last time they'd spoken when Isabella had finally told the truth. "No," Isabella said. "I don't." "Good." Leo made a call, speaking rapidly to someone about marriage licenses and officiants and flowers. Isabella listened in a daze, still trying to process the fact that she'd just agreed to marry someone she'd known for less than a month. She should have been terrified, should have been second-guessing everything. Instead, she felt calm, like something that had been broken inside her was finally clicking into place. The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Rosa transformed the garden into something out of a fairy tale with white flowers and candles, and an arch covered in roses. Sophia appeared with a dress, simple, elegant white, that fit Isabella like it had been made for her, because it probably had been. Leo had probably had it commissioned weeks ago, certain she'd say yes eventually. The realization should have annoyed her. Instead, it made her smile. That evening, Isabella stood in front of the mirror in her room and barely recognized herself. The girl looking back was healthy, rested, wearing a dress that cost more than she'd made in a year. But more than that, she looked happy, actually happy, not just surviving. There was a knock on the door. Margaret Chen stepped in, carrying a small box. "From Mr. Moretti," she said, handing it to Isabella. "He wanted you to have this before the ceremony." Inside was a necklace, simple, beautiful, with a single diamond pendant and a note in Leo's handwriting. "This was my mother's. She'd want you to have it." Isabella's hand shook as she fastened it around her neck. The ceremony happened at sunset with the garden bathed in golden light. There were maybe 10 people there: Rosa, Margaret, the guards who'd protected them, and a few others Isabella didn't recognize. And Leo standing under the arch of roses in a dark suit, watching her walk toward him like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. The officiant kept it short, traditional vows that Isabella repeated, in a voice that only shook a little. When Leo said, "I do," his voice was absolutely steady, certain. "You may kiss your bride." Leo pulled Isabella close and kissed her in front of everyone, and she kissed him back without hesitation because this was her choice, her decision, her life, finally moving forward instead of just surviving. When they broke apart, Leo whispered against her lips, "Mine." "Yours," Isabella agreed. And for the first time, the word didn't feel like a cage. It felt like coming home. The reception was small but perfect. Rosa had made food that tasted like love, and someone had set up music that drifted through the garden. Leo danced with Isabella under the stars, holding her close, and she let herself lean into his strength. Happy? He asked. Getting there? Isabella said. Ask me again in a year. I'll ask you every day for the rest of our lives. Later, much later, they ended up back in the house. Leo led her upstairs to a room she hadn't seen before. The master bedroom. She realized bigger than any space she'd ever occupied, with windows overlooking the gardens, and a bed that looked like it could fit 5 people. We don't have to, Leo started. But Isabella cut him off by pulling him down into a kiss. I know we don't have to, she said, but I want to. Are you sure? Isabella thought about everything that had led her here. The bakery, the broken cup, the bleeding hand, the apartment with the perfect view, the clothes that fit, and the meals she didn't have to ration. Leo's absolute certainty that she belonged with him, even when she'd fought it every step of the way. I'm sure, she said, about all of it. About you. That night, Isabella gave Leo all the parts of herself she'd kept hidden. The scared parts, the broken parts, the parts that still weren't sure this was real. And he took them all, treated them like they were precious, and gave her his own broken pieces in return. The next morning, Isabella woke up as Isabella Moretti. The name felt strange on her tongue, like wearing someone else's clothes. But when Leo pulled her close and kissed her shoulder, murmuring good morning against her skin, it also felt right. They stayed at the estate for another week. Leo worked from his study, handling business that Isabella didn't ask about. She read in the library, walked the gardens, and let Rosa feed her meals that were slowly adding healthy weight to her frame. And every evening, Leo would finish working and find her. And they'd have dinner together, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. We need to talk about what happens when we go back to the city, Leo said one night. What about it? You'll have responsibilities, appearances to keep up. People will know you're my wife, which means you'll be a target for anyone who wants to get to me. His expression was serious. I need you to understand what you signed up for. I signed up for you. Everything else is just details. These details could get you killed, Isabella. Then I guess you'll have to make sure that doesn't happen. She reached across the table and caught his hand. I'm not afraid. Not anymore. You should be. My world is dangerous. So is mine. At least in your world, I'm not alone. Something shifted in Leo's expression. No, you're not alone. Not ever again. They returned to the city the following week. The penthouse felt different now, less like a cage and more like the home Leo had promised it would become. Isabella's clothes hung in the closet next to Leo's. Her books filled the shelves. Her coffee mug had a permanent place beside his in the kitchen. Margaret appeared the day after they returned with a proposal. The Moretti Foundation needs a director. It's been vacant since Leo's mother passed. The position is yours if you want it. Isabella blinked. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know about surviving, about what it's like to need help and not get it. That's more valuable than any business degree. Margaret smiled. Think about it. No pressure. But Leo thinks you'd be good at it. Isabella did think about it for 3 days. She thought about it. Then she said yes. The foundation worked with at-risk youth, helping kids who were exactly where Isabella had been a few months ago. Hungry, scared, invisible. Isabella threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised everyone, including herself. She visited shelters and schools, talked to kids who looked at her like she was from another planet because she had nice clothes and didn't look tired all the time. I was you, she told a 16-year-old girl who reminded her painfully of herself. 6 months ago, I was working at a bakery, skipping meals, living in a place that should have been condemned. I know what it's like, and I'm telling you, it gets better if you let it. The girl looked skeptical. How? Sometimes someone reaches out, and sometimes you're brave enough to take their hand. Isabella pulled out a card. This is my number. You need anything, food, a place to stay, someone to talk to, you call me. Anytime. Why would you help me? Because someone helped me, and now I'm paying it forward. The work was harder than anything Isabella had done before, but it was also meaningful in ways the bakery never had been. She was making a difference, helping kids who needed someone to see them the way Leo had seen her. 3 months after the wedding, Isabella came home to find Leo waiting with champagne and an expression she couldn't read. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing's wrong. Something's right. He poured 2 glasses and handed her one. The last of your aunt's former creditors just accepted a settlement. They're officially out of our lives. Isabella let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It's really over. It's really over. You're safe. Completely permanently safe. Isabella set down her glass and walked into Leo's arms. He held her tight and she pressed her face against his chest and let herself feel it. The relief, the peace, the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me, for refusing to let me disappear, for being patient while I figured out that you were right. Leo pulled back enough to look at her. I wasn't right about everything. You're not mine because I claimed you, Isabella. You're mine because you chose me. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. He cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I wanted you from the moment I saw you fighting in that alley. But wanting someone doesn't make them yours. You deciding to stay. You choosing this life, this marriage, me, that's what makes you mine. Your choice. Always your choice. Isabella kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. I love you, she said. The words felt huge, terrifying, absolutely true. I know I haven't said it before, but I do. I love you. Leo's arms tightened around her. I know. I've known since the day you came back from visiting your aunt and chose to stay. You never said anything. I was waiting for you to be ready to say it. He kissed her forehead. I love you too, Isabella. More than I thought I could love anyone. More than is probably healthy or sane. You're everything I didn't know I needed. They stood there in the middle of the penthouse, holding each other. And Isabella thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago. Invisible, exhausted, convinced she didn't deserve better than survival. That girl was gone, and her place was someone stronger. Someone who'd learned that accepting help wasn't weakness, that letting someone in wasn't surrender, that love could look like obsession from the outside, but feel like salvation from the inside. That night, curled up in bed with Leo's arm around her waist, Isabella finally let herself believe it. She was safe. She was loved. She was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Isabella stood in front of a crowd at the Foundation's annual gala, wearing a dress that cost more than her old apartment and feeling only slightly ridiculous about it. Leo was somewhere in the crowd, watching her with that intensity that still made her chest tight. When I was 18 years old, Isabella said into the microphone, I was invisible, working a dead-end job, living in a place that was falling apart, convinced that survival was the best I could hope for. I was wrong. She paused, finding Leo's eyes in the crowd. Someone saw me. Someone refused to let me disappear. And because of that, I'm standing here today running a foundation that helps kids who were exactly where I was. Kids who think survival is the best they can hope for. She looked out at the crowd. Wealthy people who'd never known hunger, never worried about rent, never felt invisible. I'm not going to tell you that accepting help is easy. It's not. It means admitting you can't do everything alone. It means letting someone see the parts of yourself you've been hiding. It means trusting that maybe, just maybe, you deserve better than what you've settled for. Isabella's voice strengthened, but I'm here to tell you, it's worth it. Because on the other side of that fear, that pride, that stubborn refusal to need anyone, there's a life worth living. Not just surviving, actually living. The applause was thunderous. Isabella stepped off the stage and walked straight into Leo's arms. That was perfect, he said against her hair. I was terrified. I know you did it anyway. I'm proud of you. Isabella pulled back to look at him. This man who'd terrified her, controlled her, claimed her. This man who'd also saved her, seen her, loved her. I have something to tell you. Leo's expression shifted. What is it? I'm pregnant. For a moment, Leo just stared at her. Then a smile broke across his face, bigger than anything Isabella had ever seen from him. He picked her up and spun her around right there in the middle of the gala. And Isabella laughed, holding on tight. How long have you known? He demanded when he finally set her down. 2 days. I wanted to tell you somewhere special, but then I was standing up there talking about new lives and second chances, and I couldn't wait another minute. Leo's hands came to rest on her stomach, reverent. We're having a baby. We're having a baby, Isabella confirmed. Are you happy? Happy? Leo pulled her close again. Isabella, you've given me everything. A reason to be better than I was. Someone to fight for instead of just fighting. And now this. He kissed her soft and deep. I'm more than happy. I'm grateful every single day. I'm grateful. You took a chance on me. You didn't really give me a choice, Isabella pointed out. But she was smiling. No, I gave you every choice. You just finally picked the right one. Isabella laughed and kissed him again, surrounded by people, but feeling like they were the only two in the room. That night, lying in bed with Leo's hand on her stomach and their future stretching out in front of them, Isabella thought about how far she'd come. From invisible to seeing, from surviving to living, from alone to loved, in ways she hadn't known were possible. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been smooth. There had been fights and fears, and moments when Isabella had been convinced she was making the worst mistake of her life. But here now, with Leo's baby growing inside her, and a life she'd built from the ashes of who she used to be, Isabella knew the truth. Sometimes the scariest thing wasn't the cage. It was realizing the door had always been open, and you'd just been too afraid to walk through it. Sometimes freedom looked like choosing to stay. Sometimes love looked like letting someone see every broken part of you and trusting them to handle those pieces with care. And sometimes the man who claimed you without asking turned out to be the one who'd give you everything you'd been too scared to want. Isabella Moretti, born Isabella Rossi, invisible girl who'd worked in a crumbling bakery and thought survival was enough, fell asleep in her husband's arms and dreamed of the future they'd build together. A future where their child would never know what it felt like to be invisible. Where love wasn't something you earned through suffering, but something you accepted because you deserved it. Where home wasn't just a place, but a person who refused to let you disappear. She'd been claimed. She'd been seen. She'd been loved. And in the end, that had made all the